Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Carroll. Yes, once again, it is time for the Midnight Society and the North American Dogman Project Science Team to link up and bring some clarity to the Dogman topic. Yet please allow me to attend to something. Well, absolutely delicious. I've been sleeping for so long that I was a tad malnourished. But now that I have proper nutrients, let's once again take a walk into the darkness.
It stood up. I said, oh my god, it's a werewolf, and everybody in the car freaked out.
My creatures of the night. Yes, welcome back to another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on StarFox Radio. This is going to be a new year of a ton of excellent things we will be cooking up in the oven here at the Midnight Society. Yet tonight, it is time to nerd out once again with the North American Dogman Project Science Team. Yes, Dennis Carroll has met us around the late night fire to burn the midnight timber as we again sit down and try to figure out what is occurring across the United States. Dennis, my dude, how you doing?
All right, it's good to be here around the fire on a cold, dark night like this. Absolutely.
Appreciate you, my friend. And to the audience, to anyone that's new, well, Dennis is a bi-weekly host, so you should have definitely heard of him by now. If not, then check out the playlist with Dennis. He's also listed under the science team, and all his links will be up in the video as always. But yes, Dennis, what have you been up to, man?
Oh, just been doing a lot of deep research here. Been getting into some more legends and myths that may be still with us out there.
Love it. That's actually one of my specialties is prehistoric and modern day predator behaviors. And yeah, I definitely am on board with you believing that the dire wolf is still kicking around, but I'm going to take it a couple more steps and say that I myself and some of our science team, actually the majority of our science team, also believes that cave hyenas and the short-faced cave bear, as well as the Dinopithecus, the enormous baboon, are still kicking around too, man. So pretty interesting stuff.
That's true. That's very true. I believe that is a situation that's ongoing, definitely. And there are pockets of wilderness out there that no man's really set foot in. Oh, we have geographically looked at a lot of different areas, but we haven't actually set boots in those areas. So there's a lot of unexplored territory still out there, and there could be anything, especially in places like Siberia and Alaska and the northeast territories of Canada. It's very interesting. The northeast and the northwest areas of Canada, of course, are the home of Bigfoot as well as supposedly Dogman, but also it may be the remnant of the dire wolf that still exists there. There's been a lot of stories told over the years of these super wolves, gigantic type of wolves, which would fit the bill for the dire wolf. The dire wolf, if you might remember, is about 4 times larger, maybe even more so than that, of an average sized wolf. Now, your average sized wolf runs between 90 and 120 pounds, depending on how well kept they are, how well muscled they are, and how well they have fed in wilderness areas. They can be somewhat bigger, a little bit heavier than a German Shepherd, definitely. But the dire wolf is 4 to 5 times larger than that. The dire wolf could have run anywhere from 300 to 500 pounds.
Yeah, that's some great stuff too. And a lot of people don't realize that the dire wolf actually has no relation to wolves at all. It's actually related to jackals, which is super gnarly for sure. And have you ever seen the ringdocus, I believe is what some people have dubbed it, and others have dubbed it another name, but it was unalived, I believe, in the late 1800s, and it was stuffed. And obviously, the people that did the taxidermy, even if they were atrocious at it, which it definitely looked like they were, they took a whole nother level of being bozos, meaning instead of taking any sort of DNA samples to study in the future or anything, they just doused it with chemicals. Obviously, it was what you do when you're doing taxidermy and such. So now we have this thing that doesn't look like anything that would be kicking around at the moment, but we're talking about what, not even 120 years ago, give or take, this thing was supposedly unalived. And the problem is now, well, we can't get DNA from it, but it legitimately looks like it could either be a cave hyena or a dire wolf. Do you know the specimen I'm speaking about?
Well, science teaches us that we need to always look for other signs and clues to things, not just, certain aspects of it. It would be great to get DNA or hair samples or something like that, but most of the time you have to operate without it, okay, because it's something you don't usually get. So you look at other evidence and you assess that. And over the years, there have been some very strange reported in wilderness areas, especially among moose and elk, that have actually large bite marks in them that could not have been put there by wolves. I mean, this is much, much larger than a wolf, the jaw of a modern day wolf. Also, it would be bigger, much bigger than what a bear could do. I have been around bear. I've seen how they react, and they will usually slash something pretty good before they go in with the teeth part. The wolf kind of does the opposite. He goes in for the throat most of the time. But you got to remember that he doesn't do it usually alone. It's usually a pack thing going on. But now the dire wolf, which, as you said earlier, was definitely not really truly related to the wolf that we have with us now. But it was a lone hunter, I think, to a certain degree. We think that it was mainly a lone hunter that hid in tall grass, waiting for its prey. The interesting thing about this, it would have had a very large bite mark. Why are these things turning up with these large bite marks? The same thing has happened with certain things in the ocean, with whales turning up with bite marks in them that could be actually connected, to the gigantic sharks, as opposed to the megaton sharks that supposedly that may still be out there. So you look at the evidence to these things, and then you got to wonder in excess what's really going on. And I find it very interesting that you have not only sightings, actual eyewitness sightings of a dire wolf, something that could be. I've actually seen film of something very close, similar to that, and this thing was the size of a cow. That was out in a field, but it was not a cow, and it would moved and looked more like the dire wolf would do. So it's a possibility that in certain pockets these things may still exist out there, and they're leaving behind evidence. But here's the thing about the dire wolf: we got to remember, if it is in a certain area, it has to have a lot of protein. It has to feed on a lot of things. And we're talking about taking down definitely moose and elk and deer. That's what it would be. Its main. It wouldn't be going after rabbits and stuff like that. It would be going after big, large game. So that's what we need to. If we're out in the field, we need to examine closely any large, unalived game that we find or anything like that, or any type of indication that it might be something like a dire wolf.
Yeah, some pretty gnarly stuff for sure. And I've heard about some of that stuff, and I always like to nerd out. And I have never had a chance to speak to Extinct Zoo. I would obviously love to, but I'm just going to give him a free plug here. He is a brilliant mind on YouTube and really dives into prehistoric predators and such. And I've learned a ton about the dire wolves through him and such. And when you really think of it, just like any other predator, supposedly like short-faced cave bears and cave hyenas, I'm still confused as to what would have caused them to go extinct unless their bodies really couldn't handle some changes in the atmosphere. Meaning, yeah, apparently short-faced cave bears would overheat if they were too active. But again, we're talking about something that lived 90% of its time in caves in certain areas. Well, you could cool down quite easily in there. And same thing with cave hyenas and such. So I could see, some of those large American lions potentially or dire wolves that are out more on the plains and the changes out there. I could see that affecting them more. But things that are like aquatic or living in caves, I don't see why they would just have vanished. Okay, I mean, if we're talking about herbivores now, okay, I can again understand that because the foliage has changed and the areas that they used to dwell in, well, prehistoric hominoids would have came in and caused issues in their population as well. I totally get all that. But again, if a short-faced cave bear was able to take down large prehistoric buffalo and such, what's the issue now with them taking down moose and elk? So again, I don't really see the reasoning as to why some of these prehistoric animals would have really suffered.
It doesn't add up. Science says about the dire wolf that the reason they is because a lot of the tall grass. I don't agree with that because I think these animals were much more adaptive than that. They weren't just dependent on hiding in the tall grass and taking down their prey that way. I think the problem may have been though back in ancient times that there was probably an overpopulation problem going on with these things, and they were over hunting areas, and running out of food in that respect, and there might have been some starvation because of it, and that would have thinned out the population definitely. I think a lot of that might have been going on. But some of the things science comes up with as excuses do not hold water to me. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense, the reasoning behind it, because all animals, I don't care what they are highly adaptive to their environment, especially, animals like wolves, bear, and stuff like that. Take the short-faced bear, for instance. He was a humongous animal. I mean, he was a giant. It took a lot to feed something like that. And if you overhunted the area, you ran into a problem. There was definitely starvation, thinning out the herd kind of thing. Absolutely, I agree with that. But I believe also that these things being more adaptive would have moved on to different territories. They wouldn't have just been stupid enough to stay in one area where there was no game. They would definitely be searching out game in other territories and areas. What science says about a lot of this has to be taken with a large box of salt, put it that way, because to me it don't hold up in theory. And another thing about hunting and all this stuff with these things, there was a lot of competition going on. Not just the bear, the dire wolf. You had even, I don't know, a lot of people don't realize this. America once upon a time had hyenas. You know, you had jaguars. You had a lot of this stuff going on. You had a lot of competition out there. And that might have been one very important factor that cut back on the population of these things. But I think some of these things, especially like the dire wolf, would have went further afield looking for game, further deeper into the wilderness. Absolutely. And they may still be there, some of them, a remnant of them left behind.
Yeah, it's brilliant stuff right there, and I totally agree. I think people in general are always about trying to underestimate the intellect and capabilities of animals being able to adapt. And that's like a fatal flaw, I feel like. I wonder how many times in the past ancestors of ours were so arrogant to think, oh, okay, we got them all figured out. But no, I mean, animals and insects have been here long before we have been, and they're going to be here long after we are no longer here. And it's just always humorous to me because how many times do people end up getting consumed by predators? But wait a second, they were experts in their field, right? They were so smart that nope, they got outsmarted by the predator. And here's an example for you. It's a little bit off topic for Dogman, but it still makes sense as to understanding intellects. All right, jumping spiders. Those are New World spiders, okay? Long story short, we'll talk about this somewhere else to the audience, but you can look it up too. Old World spiders, tarantulas, New World spiders, jumping spiders. All right, so I'm going to get into for a moment, but jumping spiders can actually form a bond with people, meaning they recognize somebody that is potentially their owner and they will wait for you and jump all around and come hang out. So again, most people would be like, oh, it's just a stupid spider. But no, you know who's the stupid one? The human that thinks the spider's the stupid one.
Well, that's an interesting thing too about like ravens and crows who cooperate with wolf herds, wolf packs. They actually help each other out. And then, we know without a doubt that crows and ravens can remember people and they can solve problems. We've seen them do that. People tend to have an arrogance, like you said, about animals, though they're not, as smart as we think we are. But that's another thing, that factor, like I said earlier, that we've got to take into account, that adaptation. These animals were made to be, we are adaptable. We're put in different areas. We adapt to those areas. So do animals. Look at the dogs of Chernobyl. The dogs of Chernobyl have now mutated to the point where radiation doesn't bother them anymore. High levels of radiation, they can take it. And there are other animals, not just the dogs, the wild dogs of Chernobyl, but birds have also assimilated this ability to live in high radiation areas.
Yes, isn't that gnarly? And Jeremy Wade, I'm a huge fan of him as well because, like I said, I like smart people and I love to learn. But he has that show River Monsters and a couple other really cool shows that are outside of that network. And long story short is he's a biologist and he goes around looking for gigantic monster fish. And he's found all kinds of gnarly ones. But again, he was just near Chernobyl and caught this really jet black Wels catfish, but for its age, I think he said it was definitely under length and underweight, but it had so much radiation in it that he was completely baffled as to how this thing was sitting here and still functioning. And he said, even though it was a little bit smaller than it should have been, he said, overall, besides that, it looked like what a Wels catfish should be looking like. And again, nothing should be in radiation and pollution. But I've also heard recently of what they call toxic sharks, where these bull sharks are coming in because they do come into fresh water to lay their babies. A lot of people don't realize with bull sharks, they could, even as adults, come into brackish water if they wanted to. But the thing is, it actually dehydrates them and makes them work overtime. But when they're younger, brackish water and fresh water is not an issue for them. And that is what I mean too about being able to adapt. But they have been going into fresh water and laying their eggs and such. And then these little baby bull sharks, I don't believe bull sharks give live birth. I know great whites do, but I don't think bull sharks do. I think they have those little, they look like pods, but again, I could be incorrect on that. I am not an ocean biologist. All right. I do love learning about it, but either way, they are in toxic, completely filthy, radiation polluted water, and these sharks are still somehow surviving. And it just makes you wonder, like, what the heck? But it also shows you the adaptation aspects as well.
That's very true. And science is telling us that these things should not be able to live in that. They should be like the dogs and the catfish and the sharks you're talking about. They should have went belly up a long time ago, but yet they are defying science. What science says they can, that their probability is for them, because science, I think, a lot of times leaves out that adaptability that has been built into all these living things. And I think all this carries over into, well, very much like the reports I've heard of blue coyotes in California. This is a weird subject. How did these coyotes turn blue? What were they? Did they get in by? Did they get in some kind of chemical? But not only are does their fur actually have a very faint tint of blue, but they have, some of them have been found with blue eyes. Now that does not occur in nature. The only dogs like that have blue eyes are huskies. We know about that, huskies and malamutes, but not in nature. The wolf never has blue eyes. None of these creatures have. Why coyotes turning up with blue eyes? That's very strange. I think there's a lot of mutation going on, but mutation comes in the way of adaptation, or vice versa sometimes. And I think that is a lot of what maybe, going. And it may be adapting just like the dogs and stuff of Chernobyl. They may adapt to different chemicals in the soil, or chemicals that they find in the trash, or whatever the situation is. Animals are highly adaptive to their environment, no matter what that environment may be.
Yeah, that's great stuff again, man. And preach. So, where do you stand with potentially the odds of, I mean, it's really hard to throw an exact number out, so I'm not asking that. I just mean potentially, yes or no. Do you feel that cave hyenas and short faced bears and Dinopithecus, the enormous baboons, I mean, again, we're only talking about 10,000, 11,000 years ago. That is a kick of a rock. So I know that you said you believe the dire wolves are still rocking and such. I mean, do you think those three variants of what I just mentioned are kicking around too, or would you say that you believe they are just a relic of the past now?
I think it could be probable. There is I think a definite percentage of it that definitely would hold up to that. And here's another thing we've got to think about, like with the short faced bear, the baboons, the hyenas, all these animals, like I said, are highly adaptive. So they can adapt to different types of prey. I have seen bear eat berries or small game. Okay. That's the way they do. They do whatever it takes to survive. You will survive if you break all the rules. Okay. In nature, that's the way it goes. The only thing that separates us from the animals, and they say this in John Wick movies a lot, but it's true. The only thing that separates us from the animals are rules. The animals have no rules. Everything's off the table when it comes to them because they know how to survive, and whatever it takes to survive, no matter what it is they have to eat, whether it be carrion or berries or bark, whatever the situation, they do what it takes to survive, and they're highly adaptive in that precept.
That's again excellent stuff right there. And a lot of people too don't realize when it comes to bears, especially grizzlies and other variants like the Kodiak bears and such, they are split, meaning coastal grizzly bears are omnivorous, as you just stated. They eat berries and things, and also fish and all kinds of other different things. Whereas grizzlies that are inland, like in Yellowstone and such, that don't have access necessarily to fish and other things are fully carnivorous. And yeah, they're both considered grizzlies and such. But also, a lot of people don't realize that Kodiak bears are grizzly bears, but they have been split off from grizzly bears for quite a long time, or I should say, inland versions of grizzly bears, because Kodiak Island is pretty isolated. Not saying a Kodiak bear couldn't swim again back to the mainland and a brown bear over there, or, because that's how it all did occur at first. But now that these brown bears who originally swam over to Kodiak Island have been there for so long, they are, I believe, the largest bear in weight. I mean, I know polar bears and such get taller, but the Kodiak brown bears are absolutely monsters, dude.
Oh yeah, and the dad definitely has a skin on that. Absolutely. And here's the thing about it: we got to remember too. These animals prey on the old and the injured, and a lot of the very young too, because those are the ones that don't fight back. Those are the ones that won't give them so much trouble. You got to remember this: when the bear gets old or the lion gets old, he doesn't show his firmness if he can help it. He may have a bad leg, he may have a bad knee, he may have something bad with him. He tries to hide that because he knows that he is becoming to look like a victim. And that's what these animals are looking for a lot of times. They're looking for the infirm, the aged, the very young, whatever the situation is, they know what to go after. Okay. And I tell this to people as well. Don't make yourself a victim like that either. Don't show weakness, because there are predators out there in parking lots and all that looking and watching you, just like they are out in the woods and the forests and the jungles. The predators are always looking for that one instance of weakness that they can exploit, and they will always do so.
That's again some more brilliant stuff, and yeah, it would make sense. I mean, especially if something else is trying to challenge you for your quote unquote title or leadership of your squad, etc., or anything. Yeah, you don't want to show your injury. It's no different than, I mean, humans. If you're obviously in like MMA or something, or even football and such, or any sport, you don't want to show, your injuries. And when it comes back into the dire wolves, like you were saying, how much more research have you been spending on that? Because, like I said, I know enough about their behaviors and such, and also their relations. But again, I don't really hear, I guess, a lot of descriptions that they know fully what it looks like. Yeah, I know there's been depictions, but there's been a bunch of different depictions as to what a dire wolf fully looks like, because I don't know if they've also found very good specimens in permafrost. I know that they found that jet black canine thing that you and I have been diving into that was 18,000 years old. I know they found wolf pups and a saber-tooth, cat and such. But have they found like full specimens of dire wolves? Because whenever I try to Google it, I don't think I ever see anything that is actually a permafrost thing that's been recreated.
Well, absolutely. I've actually seen some skulls supposedly of dire wolves, as compared to the skull of a regular wolf. It is an enormous skull, actually. And it's shaped completely different too in many aspects. So what you're dealing with is a monstrous looking thing. But I think if we go back into folklore, and I think a lot of clues are hidden in folklore. You take, for instance, the Wahila of the Nahanni Valley. That sounds very much like a dire wolf to me, something similar to that. And also, you had the Shunker and they actually have a specimen of that, by the way, that is mounted. That is a different looking animal altogether, and it looks like a rather small or malnourished type of a dire wolf. The clues are there, I think. We just need to connect the dots and look at the patterns of where these clues are leading us. And a lot of this can be found in folklore, legend, and myth, because all of this began somewhere as a true incident. And we have to narrow it down to try to find out where a lot of this stuff is still going on. And wherever you have these clues, that would be the first place to look. You always go to the place where things have occurred and start out from there. You may have to go differently. You may have to take a different direction, but that's your starting point. You always go to the starting point and go from there. That's the way to do it. But I think we're looking at a lot of clues that may be there. And like I said, we need to connect those dots to come to the solution that we're looking for. And I think in some of these way out of the way places, where a lot of people have never went to, a lot of wilderness areas are definitely where you would look first for something like this. These things, I'm going to tell you something about this super wolf, and that's what it was. I call it the super wolf because it was a very smart, I think, a very intelligent animal, and not only big and bulky, but smart as well. All animals have, like you said earlier, a very intense intellect about them. And I think these animals, these super wolves, are smart enough to know that their number one enemy was man, not the short-faced bear, not some of these other things, not much like man. And they knew that they needed to retreat from the cities and villages of men to seek out the most, shall we say, uninhabited wilderness areas. That's where they would go. I would go there. Anything that has a high intelligence would definitely do that. You get away from man because man is your number one enemy. And you don't want to stay around that. You don't want to stay with that within sight. So these things are treated away from man. And I think that's where you will find them, the furthest reaches of the wilderness.
Makes a ton of sense. And also, a lot of people don't realize how much wilderness is really still out there to an extent, meaning, yes, well, you have these people that are more isolated and such, but the majority of humans definitely like to congregate together, okay? And they, well, definitely group up. And I mean, if you and I were able to stand out at the edge of, say, where the forest starts to potentially within the next like 2 to 3 miles meet culture, we could then see all the lights of the city and such, but everyone is congested right into those areas. And especially up in New England, there is so much wilderness. Again, a lot of people don't realize Maine is the most forested state in the whole United States. All right. We have the most forest per capita. We have more forest than people. And we are very pro-environmental up here and try to protect our wilderness. But again, when you go to areas like Vermont, New Hampshire, all these parts up here in New England, even though technically upstate New York is not New England, and I don't believe Pennsylvania is either, but it's all like right up there. There's just so much forest. And again, when you go out to the West Coast now, in places like Washington, Oregon, and California and such, and then when you go up to Canada, there's a ton of wilderness. So yeah, it would make logical sense that these people that are trying to do nefarious things, these animals that want to survive, yeah, of course, would go to different areas that are not so highly inhabited by humans or necessarily competition. Meaning, here's a really cool thing for you. They know it's a Tyrannosaurus Rex. They don't know if it's a subvariant, but they think it's actually a T-Rex. It just, happened to decide to go up towards the North Pole instead of down south like every other predator and such. So when this T-Rex went up to the North Pole, there were other herbivores there and such, but there were no predators really. And this was the most dominant predator, had no competition. So ended up, they believe, having some sort of white feathers on it, and it would blend in with the snow and such. But there you go with the facts of adaptation. I mean, what made this one or these group, obviously, because it needed a healthy pod to reproduce and not have, genetic effects by that. But what caused them to go to the North Pole, and then what caused their brothers and sisters to go down to the sunny parts,
Absolutely. Like you said before, these things have a distinct intellect, and they know what their enemy is, and they know that to get away from it, you might have to move to a different location, definitely, where that enemy is not there. But we have to also understand a lot of times that these the predators, like the dinosaurs, there may still be a remnant of them left. I don't think, and I will never believe that all of a sudden somebody flipped a switch and all the dinosaurs. I don't believe that happened. I never will go with that theory. I think that pockets of the dinosaurs still existed and may still exist to this day because man interacted with these things. Science tells us, there was millions of years difference, and I don't believe that either, because where did we get stories about dragons at? The clues are there, staring us in the face, so obvious. Why do we, gloss over them and overlook them? And I say this to a lot of these so-called monster hunting teams. Some of them go out armed, ready for what? Are you going to bring back a specimen, a trophy? Or are you going to do it the other way, as a true monster hunting team would do? Are you going to take photographs? You're going to document? You're going to document the evidence of what your finding is and leave it alive. So it depends on what your attitude is. But these animals know what your intentions are. Okay, because man, he wears his intentions on his sleeve, whatever he does, especially when you go out heavily armed. Now, I know it's a good thing to be armed to protect yourself. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, why are you going out looking armed for something like that? You are tending to unalive it. These things know that. They understand what your intent is, and they act accordingly. I can't blame them. I would do the same thing.
Again, that's excellent stuff. And people don't realize, yeah, of course, animals can pick up on that. I have a friend right now that has an injury, for example, and his dog immediately goes towards where his injury is. And again, why do you think some dogs and such pick up on people's poor demeanor? I mean, don't get me wrong, some dogs are just straight up dinks no matter what, all right? But for the most part, an animal is not going to feel okay around you if you have a bad demeanor. Meaning, there's no way in my eyes, if someone can show me, sure, yes, I'm offering them something, but what is food if you are being captured or destroyed? They can go get food elsewhere. So, what makes this crow and raven come over and take peanuts out of my hand? What makes these neighborhood squirrels again and the chipmunks and such so that I can pet them, and stray cats I are able to build bonds with and such? That to me tells me that they obviously are able to tell the difference of who's who, meaning if my roommate or somebody else tries to feed one of the neighborhood squirrels that's come over to chill, they don't want to take it from them. They want nothing to do with them. They run off and wait in the tree, and then as soon as I open the door, they come over and chill. So they can obviously tell the difference of who's who. And yeah, of course, nothing wants to be around somebody that's going to be nefarious, but do you agree that, say, if I was just out walking in the wilderness, meaning I'll give you a story right here. Say if you were out hunting, right? And I'm out walking like I was, right? So I'm going to tell you what really happened to me, but then we're also going to theoretically pretend you're hunting and this happens, right? Okay. So as I'm walking, this car comes whipping around the corner, right? Which means you could be returning to your truck from hunting, same thing. And this fox was running across the road, and this car was going to smoke it because it paused for a second because of the headlights. So I waved my hands in the road, right? And the truck swerved, stopped. The fox ran off. Okay, right? I stood there for a second because I was like, oh, that fox is so cool. And I heard a little bit of rustling right there, and the fox was still looking at me and wasn't acting bizarre or anything, but just looking at me. So I just squatted down a little bit, and I was like, come here, baby. And I just sat there. And this was a back road, so it was not jet black, but there's street lights and stuff, but pretty chill. So after that car went flying by like a bozo, I just sat there and I didn't get to touch it or anything, but the fox came up and it sniffed my hand as I put it out there, and then something obviously, distracted it, and then it ran off back into the forest. But say if you had your hunting gear on and all that stuff, do you think that fox would have came up to you like that? Because I'm not sure it would have.
It's a possibility. Probably would not. I wouldn't have. Definitely. I would approach you very cautiously. But here's something we've got to remember about animals, and something that I've observed my own self. We've all observed it one time or another, whether registered or not. Animals are super sensitive. They pick up on their environment and things in their environment 1,000 times better than you and I do. Okay. And they are very sensitive to emotional and violent things too. Of course, they understand that. They understand violence because they live in that world. They know what violence will do. And they know that we can be very violent. They can feel our intentions. I did a podcast not long ago where I talked about the space that we have. We get very uncomfortable when people get too close to us. We're all built that way. We have that built into us. It's sort of like, personal space, as we call it. Once you invade that personal space, it's almost like a spiritual attack against that person. Animals feel the same way. They have a space too, just like you and I do. And if you get too close to a wild animal with the wrong intentions, it picks up on that, without a doubt. Just like you'd have a neon sign for your intentions to that animal. He realizes, he knows what you're doing. He can sense it most of the time, unless there's something wrong with that animal. If there's he's injured or something, he's not being himself. But when he's 100% his true self, and you invade his space, one of two things can happen. He will either let you do that, or he will attack you. That's the way that goes. But I've seen people that would do very much like that too. We all have that space, even the animals. We have that personal space. And once you invade that, it can be seen as a spiritual attack, without a doubt.
Great stuff right there, man. Excellent. And as we are starting to wrap this up, yeah, it's a prime example of, even when I meet like somebody's new dog or something, you never touch the dog until the dog is okay with you, meaning it smelled you and stuff, and then it's showing you, hey, okay, you can touch me now. Same thing with any of the wild animals. I mean, I never pet one of the squirrels and stuff until when I'm feeding them a peanut. They do basically what I call the little high five, okay? Meaning they put one of their hands on the side of your hand to balance themselves, and then the other hand, they are putting that on your finger, and then they lean in with their mouth, which means obviously they're totally vulnerable, and they just take the peanut from you, and then as they push off, it's like a little high five. So the next time they come up, the same one, you do that, and then you touch the top of their head for a little bit. They're like, oh, what the heck was that? And then they realize it was just you. They're like, hey, I like you. And then you're good, but you never just reach out and like start touching them.
That's true. We got to understand too what that disposition is of that animal. It could, like I said, it could be not feeling well, just like you and I. We have days we don't feel good. We get PO'd by things. We may be angry. Animals do the same thing, without a doubt.
Excellent stuff right there, my friend. And before we let you get back to your busy schedule, is there anything else you would like to touch base on tonight, my friend?
Well, I think, that we go deep into legend and folklore. And like I say, the indicators are there that point us to things we need to look at more closely. I think the dire wolf, although it's a possibility that all of them are gone, I think there may be pockets of them that still exist. I think there may be parts of our planet that we have still yet to explore to find out what the secrets that it may be hiding from us truly are.
Couldn't agree more, my friend. And to the audience, yes, this will be concluding the meeting of the Midnight Society. But no worries. I, put out content almost daily. And as stated, Dennis is also on here bi-weekly. But if you do want to hear from him more than that, of course, just go over and check out his links. That will be up in the description, because Dennis is always churning out content as well, and he dives into a very broad range of topics. So yeah, man, again, thanks for popping in and hanging out with us tonight, bro.
Oh, anytime, brother.
You legends, you. I adore every single one of you. And thank you for making it this far tonight on this episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on Star Fox Radio. I will see you very soon.